Welcome, patrons! Much like how I ramble on about your Inquisitor, let's talk about your Hawk. And sort of your Mage Warden, as they come from the same family, but this is mostly about Hawk. Family features. Because every time I see it brought up someone didn't know about it, the appearance of your family changes with how you create your character. The combination has to do with what preset you choose and what skin color you have. And as all of my Hawks have a darker skin tone, I have my beloved bowl cut Bethany and 5-head Carver to represent the Hawk family line in this video. I also wanted to say I heavily mod the game and I haven't really worked out some of the kinks yet, so something I messed up and now Carver doesn't have eyebrows. He usually has eyebrows though, so enjoy this and a few other mod weirdness and clips here. So in short, bless this mess. Amell family history. The Amell family line, at least as the noble family in Kirkwall, dates back to the Fourth Blight, which was in the early Exalted Age. Despite that though, our knowledge of the Amell line only goes back 2 generations. And here folks, we begin a game of whose timeline is it anyway, where the dates are made up and the timeline doesn't matter. I'm about to throw a lot of dates at you, and at the end I'll show you a timeline of it. As a warning, it's very wonky. Remember, Dragon Age 2 was made from concept to release in a year. It's no coincidence that there are more mistakes in Dragon Age 2 codex entries than the other games combined. We just sort of have to take what we're given and go with writer's intention on this. And before you ask, I do think that most of the stuff they mentioned does happen, even if the dates don't line up. I doubt the writers will go back and take away history, as it would just be a lot easier to say that the date was wrong. Now, we also need to talk about the state of Kirkwall at the time Hawk's grandfather was in his prime, as it helps build a picture. 914 Dragon. Perrin Threnhold became Viscount of Kirkwall. During his rule, he would charge large taxes on Orlesian ships, along with other uncouth behavior. At the time, the Divine was a friend of the Orlesian ruler, so she used the Knight Commander of the Templars to pressure the Viscount into not doing that. 921 Dragon. Perrin stormed the Templars and killed the Knight Commander for this. The young Meredith Stannard, yes that Meredith, would lead a charge against the Viscount's keep and arrest Perrin. 2 years later, in 923 Dragon, Perrin was poisoned and died. Now back to the Amell family. To make sense of this, here's a family tree I quickly whipped up, and let's go down the line and talk about all the people here. Lord Aristide Amell married a woman named Bethanne Walker, and together they had 2 children, Leandra, the oldest daughter, and Gamlen, the younger son by a year. Lord Faustin Amell was Aristide's brother who married an unknown woman. He also had 2 children, Damien and Revka Amell. Both were well respected in Kirkwall, and it said that Lord Aristide was in line to become Viscount after Perrin was arrested, at least were it not for a sudden string of familial bad luck that ruined the Amell name. Not too much is known about Damien, but sometime after the death of Lord Aristide, Damien was accused of smuggling. His father, Lord Faustin, spent the entire family fortune trying to clear his son's name. After that failed, Faustin began to take out loans from a criminal organization known as the Council of Five, with ties to slave traders. All of this was still unsuccessful, and Damien was eventually imprisoned. Lord Faustin died soon after. Before all of that, his daughter Revka married an unknown man, and together they had 5 children. It's unknown how it came about, but the Templars marched into Revka's home and took her oldest child away for being a mage, leaving her weeping in the streets of Hightown as they marched away. This firstborn child would be taken to the Ferelden Circle and could later become the hero of Ferelden. After her father died, Revka vanished, never to be heard from again. Her husband took the remaining 4 children and moved from Kirkwall. Eventually, all of Revka's children were found to be mages and taken into a circle somewhere in Thedas. It's unknown what became of the Warden Amell's siblings. Going back to Lord Aristide, his side of the Amell line struck bad luck when Leandra ran off with an apostate mage in 905 Dragon. I'll go into that more later. After Leandra ran off, her parents were devastated, both dying about 6 years after she left. Gamlen, the youngest son, took up the household. In his childhood, him and Leandra were extremely close, so her sudden departure really hit him hard. He had developed a gambling addiction early on in life, his father Aristide cutting off his allowances and tried to put the house under guard to prevent him from escaping the house and gambling, although he usually found his way out anyway. After Leandra left, eventually, Gamlen met Mara Hartling, a chambermaid of the house and daughter of the Amell's head cook. When the elder Amells grew sick with cholera, it was them who nursed them back to health. Bethanne died in 910 Dragon during another bout of cholera, and Aristide died a year later in 911. After his parents died, Gamlen went back to gambling away his life, while Mara became employed with the Reinhardts, a noble family that was once close to the Amells. Remember that debt that Lord Faustin had gathered? The Council of Five were still looking for that debt to be repaid, and as Gamlen was the only surviving member in Kirkwall, the debt was placed upon him. This would be why the Amell house belonged to slavers. It would be around this time that Gamlen would start looking for the Gem of Kaershek, a priceless jewel said to bring good luck, something Gamlen wanted most in life. Mara would leave him soon after, saying that she wouldn't let him waste another life like he wasted his. Only years later, around 937 Dragon, would this make sense. Gamlen would be introduced to his daughter, known as Charade, who describes that Mara died around 936 Dragon. Today, Charade acts as a Red Jenny around Tanterville. We don't know much about Charade, although we do know it's not her actual name. Charade also talks a bit about her mother in World of Thedas Volume 2, saying that Mara never told her much about her father. She said that she was told at a young age that her father died and that sadness stole his heart. Charade also reported that she would find her mother often holding a scrap of red silk that had the Amell crest on it. This scrap of fabric would be burned along with Mara when she died. Now, let's go back to that timeline. The major part of this is that Viscount Perrin was arrested in 921 Dragon, so for Lord Aristide to be in the running for Viscount, he would have to be alive then. Except he is supposed to have died in 911 Dragon, and even if he didn't die then, the twins were supposed to be born shortly after he died. If he died after 921, that would make Bethany and Carver at max 9 years old at the start of the game. And that's not even going into the whole part of the Amells losing their credit would be Hawke's conception, which again, if near 921, Hawke would be just a child. The most obvious move here is to change the date of when Perrin was arrested, right? We also have trouble there, because Meredith needs to be Knight Captain in 920 Dragon, and see her Knight Commander die by tyranny, as that's a huge part of her character. Despite that, it's still the best course of action in my mind, as it would just be so much easier to up Meredith's age by about 10 years and rework all of this. But even in World of Thedas Volume 2, we still list Perrin being Viscount in 920 Dragon. Malcolm and Lyanndra Hawke. We aren't sure of most of Malcolm's past before the Circle or what he looked like, although we do know that he sounds exactly like a male Hawke.
Be bound here for eternity, hunger stilled, rage smothered, desire dampened, pride crushed. In the name of the Maker, so let it be.
Malcolm would never tell Lyanndra or his children where exactly he was from. Only Lyanndra was given the answer, freedom's price is never cheap, but that was 100 leagues in a lifetime ago. His haunted gaze lingered on his favorite boots, and he would say no more. We know that he was Ferelden, and was brought to Kirkwall as an apprentice late in the Blessed Age. He was said to be very bright and was able to learn complex spells at the age of 14, after which time his development slowed down, although it's believed he began hiding his abilities to not draw attention from the Templars. He was 19 when he took his harrowing. In 905 Dragon, at a banquet held by Viscount Perrin Threnhold for Grand Duchess Lorian, Malcolm met Lyanndra.
Your father had stones the size of watermelons. Wardens, demons, blood magic. Lyanndra had shit herself to hear what he did in her name.
Did you ever meet him? Or did they just elope one day?
I was there when they met at one of the Viscount's dismal things. Mages were trotted out to impress the nobles. Malcolm somehow brought dignity to it. Lyanndra couldn't stop staring. I was the one who distracted father so they could sneak out to the balcony to talk.
The show that he put on is described in World of Thedas Volume 2 as a fantastical fiery bird emerging from the flame of a candle. The bird took wing and flew twice around the ballroom, pausing briefly over the upturned face of the spellbound Lady Lyanndra Amell. The two began meeting in secret, Lyanndra getting help from a younger brother and Malcolm being let free by a Templar named Sir Marverar Carver, who believed the best mages shouldn't be locked up in circles. A few months after they met, Lyanndra found out that she was pregnant with Malcolm's child, or as we know them now, your Hawke. Malcolm proposed to her after finding out, and the two began to plan to run away together, marrying in secret soon after. While Malcolm worked to find a way back to Ferelden, Lord Aristide found out about Lyandra's pregnancy and marriage. Now, at the time, Lyanndra was promised to marry Guillaume de Lancey, so this, mixed with the fact that it was the child of a mage, angered Aristide, who hired men to look for Malcolm and turn him into the Templars. Lyanndra was able to send a final message through Gamlen to Malcolm, who was able to get out in time. So, now a broke, hunted apostate squatting in Lowtown was approached by Warden Commander Larius. I won't go into the whole plot of the Legacy DLC, but TLDR, by accepting to do a blood magic ritual, or perhaps better worded, after being persuaded by Larius, who threatened to kill Lyanndra, the Wardens agreed to Malcolm's terms: a bit of money, passage to Ferelden, and being able to get Lyanndra from her home safely. So, eventually, the day comes. Malcolm and a group of Grey Wardens march the Amell household to gather Lyanndra. Upon hearing that Malcolm was back with Grey Wardens, Lord Aristide gave Lyanndra a choice. stay with her family, and they will accept the child as their own. She doesn't even need to marry Guillaume, or go with Malcolm and be disowned from the family. Leandra chose Malcolm. Leandra was allowed to leave, her mother refusing to even speak to her as she left, and her father saying that she was no longer an Amell. She left with nothing but the clothes on her back, telling a surprised Malcolm she already had everything she needed now. And here we also come into some inconsistencies, namely from the item pack DLCs that no one bought, so who actually cares, but from a few codex entries there, it differs from the story in two ways. One, that Malcolm met Leandra while he was in a mercenary group, the Crimson Oars. And two, while in the Crimson Oars, he was fighting the Carta. During the battle, the leader of the Crimson Oars was badly hurt and he used magic to save the leader. The Templars were alerted and he was suddenly being hunted. He didn't want to leave the city before saying goodbye to Leandra, so he dressed in Norwegian robes, broke into a Norwegian ball held for Empress Celine Kirkwall, and chanced to dance with Leandra, after telling her he was to leave the two left together to Ferelden from the ball. Life in Ferelden. After the couple arrived in Ferelden, the two were constantly on the move from Templar hunters. Our beloved Hawke was soon born after they arrived. The couple first settled in Amaranthine, Malcolm working as a farmhand and Leandra using her needlework to sew clothing. Around 911 Dragon, the twins Bethany and Carver were born, Carver being the older of the two. Bethany and perhaps Hawke soon developed their magic, much to the dismay of Malcolm, who didn't want his children to have to live their lives on the run either. Bethany first learned of her magic at the age of 9, when she accidentally threw a bully across the field, causing the family to quickly pack up and leave in fear of Templars. Malcolm trained his children how to use their powers correctly, and how to keep their abilities a secret. Because of this, Malcolm spent much more time with his mage children than with Carver, who did take some resentment in not being able to spend time with his father. While Bethany and Carver were close, this resentment did cause Carver to act out towards his siblings, as when he nailed Bethany's pigtails to her bedpost. Around 920 Dragon, the Hawke family settled on the outskirts of Lothering. Malcolm grew sick and would eventually pass in 927 Dragon, leaving the care of the family to his eldest child, your Hawke. In 930 Dragon, Carver and a non-mage Hawke signed up for King Caelan's regiment against the Darkspawn in Ostagar, leaving Leandra, Bethany, and a mage Hawke alone to take care of the family home. It said that Carver was well respected in his company at Ostagar, that while he had a sour attitude, he worked hard and fought harder. Apparently, it took 3 men to tackle him and slap some sense into him during the call for retreat at Ostagar because he refused to believe that he couldn't protect his family from the Darkspawn. Months later, after the Battle of Ostagar, an injured Carver and a non-mage Hawke showed up at their family home, dragging away their family from Lothering to escape the Darkspawn horde. Dragon Age 2. I won't go into the exact happenings of Dragon Age 2 because you should all know that by now, but I will say a bit of stuff you probably missed in codex entries, small dialogues, or letters. Hawke. If you haven't placed it together yet yourself, Hawke was born around 9-6 Dragon, and the twins born around 9-11, making Hawke 24 at the start of the game and the twins being 21. As time passes from each act, the rough age of Hawke at the start of each act, starting at Act 1, is 25, Act 2, 28, and Act 3, 31. Varric's nickname for Hawke is Hawke, but in Mark of the Assassin, Hawke can actually ask Varric for a nickname. If diplomatic, Varric replies, Waffles. If charming, Chuckles, which is later given to Solus, and if aggressive, Killer. There's only mention of it once in a codex entry, and you can sort of find it in your room in Hightown, but Hawke apparently keeps a diary. Even when I sided with the Templars for the first time, it took me a long time for this to actually be drilled into my mind, but at the end of the game, if you side with the Templars, your Hawke is actually made Viscount of Kirkwall, although later we find out they did not hold office for long. If siding with the mages, Hawke is on the run from the Templars, fearing that Chandri might call for an exalted march if they stayed in town and rallied the mages. Which it nearly did, as that was rumored to be the plot of the scrap DLC for Dragon Age 2, that much of which was eventually reused as part of Inquisition. Bethany and Carver. Obviously, only one half of the twins survives, depending on what you choose for your Hawke. Besides death at the hands of an ogre, both have the chance to either die in the Deep Roads, become a warden, or Bethany is taken to the Circle while Carver joins the Templar Order. If taken to a Circle, Bethany actually grows to enjoy it somehow, and she's glad that she doesn't have to be on the run anymore. She passes her harrowing easily, and she teaches young apprentices the ways of magic. If Carver goes off to join the Templars, he promises to not reveal his sibling's secret. Carver does send letters back home saying that he enjoys his place in the Templars, but is wary of some of their beliefs. If a warden, Bethany does not take it well. From letters that she sends back home, it suggests that she resents Hawks for coming out just fine for the Deep Roads, unlike her. If met again throughout the game, Bethany will tell Hawke that she hates not being able to help her family more and that it hurts her to be so far away from her family. Eventually, during the final battle, Bethany will tell Hawke that she forgives them, and tells Hawke that she isn't a Grey Warden, she's your sister, suggesting that while she has accepted her life as a Grey Warden, she still hates it. Carver, on the other hand, does well in the Warden, stating that he enjoys the purpose he has found in the Order and that he isn't living under the sibling shadow anymore. During the course of the game and Codex entries, we learn a few interesting tidbits about their lives. Carver has a tattoo of a Mabari, and he can make it bark somehow. Bethany at one point says that one of her best friends was killed by a Canarian Lothering, likely referring to Sten from Dragon Age Origins. If Hawke is a female, a letter from a girl named Ebrin Peaches Janeth mentions that she and Carver had a short-lived relationship. If Hawke is male, Peaches begs Carver to introduce her to his brother. If taken to the Circle, Isabella sends Bethany smutty books to read. In fact, Bethany is actually described as an avid reader and particularly fond of stories with princes in them. Carver has a crush on Meryl, and Bethany mentions that she misses the Lothering Chantry because she loves Sister Liliana's stories. Liliana actually also mentioned this in Dragon Age Inquisition as well. Inquisition. After the events of Kirkwall, no matter what happens in-game, Hawke starts to investigate what happens to the Wardens. Eventually, Hawke and the Inquisitor meet, Hawke being around 35 at the time. And regardless of their fate, the living Hawke sibling has taken shelter with Aveline, away from all the craziness that is going on around Thedas. Also, if one of the twins is a Warden, you can find the Warden conscription ale in their name. Carver is labeled Toast Them All, while Bethany is labeled Princess Piss. This all leads into the Here Lies the Abyss quest, in which the Inquisitor is left with the choice of who to leave in the Fade, one of the Warden companions or Hawke. If Hawke survives, they go out to Weishaupt to inform the Order what has happened. Eventually, Varric reports that he has heard that Weishaupt is a giant mess, and that Hawke is still there 2 years after they went there. During the slideshow in Trespasser DLC, at 38 years old, Hawke is said to be with Varric, rebuilding Kirkwall together. End of a champion? Now, not everyone left the Warden in the Fade. Some left Hawke behind. The question on everyone's lips, will Hawke, somehow, find a way to survive the Fade? There are theories that Hawke was meant to be the one left in the Fade, and that possibly they can escape. Most of this is based on what I'm going to call denial from fans, as the joke of Hawke is that they are somehow stupidly lucky and can get away with anything. But there is one thing to note here that doesn't make the idea completely crazy. When Hawke meets Flemeth again on Sundermount, she gives them some advice.
Before I go, a word of advice. We stand upon the precipice of change. The world fears the inevitable plummet into the abyss. Watch for that moment, and when it comes, do not hesitate to leap. It is only when you fall that you learn whether you can fly.
What should I do?
Do as I do. Become a dragon. You could never be a dragon.
Precipice of change. Falling. Abyss. While this could just be coincidence, many take this to believe that Hawke needed to stay behind, and that perhaps they may be saved. That being said, I'm not holding my hopes up. Near the end of the Trespasser DLC, you find the final chapter of Hardin Hightown in the Theater Thara. This chapter, Varric notes, is not something he wrote. Inside, it describes the main character of Hardin Hightown relaxing and drinking with a person that changes depending on who you left in the Fade. Here's a clip of me reading the entirety of Hardin Hightown, but this is just the last few moments of your Hawke, telling us that they are at peace. He poured some noxious Ander stout from an oak cask into a heavy tankard and carried it outside to a dark-haired nobleman on the patio, idly strumming a lute so out of tune it sounded like some other instrument, perhaps a tuba or a kettledrum, trying to invent music from scratch. Donnan handed over the tankard, only half hoping it would stop him from playing anymore. "That's very kind of you, guardsman." Thankfully, the gentleman set aside his lute and took the tankard, putting his feet up on the table in front of him. "It's just dawning these days," he replied, looking out over the waves. "My time in the Kirkwall Guard is over." "It's never really gone," the nobleman smiled. "Kirkwall, it finds its way into your soul, and once it gets there, you carry it always." The sun was setting behind them, casting long shadows from the tavern down to the water. A flock of cormorants took advantage of the fading light to dive for fish, making their way back out to sea. "Maybe so." Donnan smiled, too. "But the world can always use a champion, or a guardsman, wherever they happen to go." The gentleman raised his tankard. "I'll drink to that." And the two men watched the last of the light disappear in peace. He poured a glass of red Orlesian wine and carried it out to the patio where Lady Marielle sat, playing a lute for the benefit of a distant flock of cormorants and a sleepy Mabari hound. Donnan handed her the glass with a smile. Can I get you anything else, your ladyship? That's very kind of you, guardsman. Mariel set aside her lute. The sleepy hound looked up, annoyed at having its lullaby interrupted. It's just dawning these days, he replied, looking out over the waves. My time in the Kirkwall Guard is over. Is it? She smiled slyly over the glass. You don't think naming a tavern the Watch was a sign that perhaps you can take the guardsman out of Kirkwall and even out of the guard, but he never quite leaves? The sun was setting behind them. The hound stretched and ambled over to the table to lay his head on Lady Mariel's knee and beg for table scraps. In the distance, the cormorants took off in a single motion to return to their roosts up the shore. Donnan smiled back. Maybe you're right, but tonight, I'm off duty, your ladyship. Mariel, she corrected. And to answer your question, you can get me some company. One guardsman might suffice. And the two of them watched the last of the light disappear together in peace. And that, dear patrons, is all that we know of Hawke and the Amell family. If you have still lingering questions, proof that I'm wrong, comments about your own fan theory, feel free to tweet me at Gilderthon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillanon on Reddit. Durasher all.